How are you? I'm Eric Francis. When I first learned to draw, I made line drawings of cartoons and comic book characters. But when I learned to paint, my focus shifted from lines to areas of color. Even though this is a pen drawing, you can see that I focused on the overall color of a shape and how it transitions into another color. Now look at the right eye and eyebrow. Notice its overall shape and how each color has its own shape and space. But they also transition into each other. This is what we're going to be focused on. That is color and how each color transitions into each other. We're focused on this because in the first video of this series, we made a line drawing. Now, we're going to fill it with three-dimensional depth. Let's look at our reference picture and pick out different areas of color. We artists call these areas of color tone when we're drawing and painting portraits. Like highlights, midtones, and shadows are all tone. We can also call them value. Tone and value deal with lightness and darkness of color. The darkest values would be in the hair and the eyes. And the lightest values would be in the highlights in the eyes. Now, when we talk about colors transitioning into each other, we're talking about gradation. Look at how the values go from dark to light to dark again on the forehead. We're going to have to recreate this gradation in our drawing. Let's make a value chart. A value chart shows value and gradation. It's going to be based on our image. Our chart goes from the darkest to the lightest value. Let's start with the darkest. Now the darkest values can be found in the hair and the eyes. The next darkest value would be the eyebrows. And the third value, you can find that in the background. Our next dark value you can find on the side of the face. The next is here. Now here. And finally, the highlights. Let's start the value chart. We're going to need a sheet of paper, a number 2 pencil, a 2B pencil, and a General's Layout extra black pencil. Measure about 1/3 of the width of your paper and draw a line across it. Now we're going to draw 7 cells because we have 7 different values. We're using our number 2 pencil to make our first and darkest value. The darker you press, the darker your lines will be. I use a sheet of paper underneath it because it allows me to go past the edges. And I occasionally use a pencil to hold the paper down. I also cross hatch it because you're going to have to come at this thing from many different angles to get it as dark as possible. Now we go to the 4th cell and we create a middle value. A lot of times if we would try to do a lighter value, it would be too light. Or if we go to a darker value, it might be too dark. When you do the mid value, it kind of gives you balance. Some of the skills that we learn or we're improving upon is how to hold a pencil and how to create even, smooth values. We follow the same process for the rest of the values. We move on to value number 2. And then we move to value number 5. And now we're doing value number 3. And we finish with value number 6. We follow the same process for each pencil. You can see the difference between the pencils. Now the number 2 pencil is just a little too light, and the layout pencil is too dark. So we're going to go with the 2B pencil. We're actually going to use the layout pencils for the darkest value. That's value 1. You see that we leave value 7 blank. That's because we use the color of the paper as highlights. Now let's get started. This is where we ended in the first video. What I want you to do is keep the reference image close by. And I also want you to keep the value chart close by. we're going to match the reference image to the value chart, and we're going to draw it on our picture. Here's what I mean. Say, for example, we wanted to draw the hair. Well, first thing we do is we'd find its match on the value chart, and its match is value 1. We then add value 1 to our drawing. What value do you think I used to draw in the background? These are the kinds of decisions that you're going to have to make when you're drawing your drawing. For this drawing, we're going to need glossy magazine paper, like the kind you find in junk mail, a 2B pencil, and General's Layout Extra Black pencil. What I'm doing is focusing on these shapes and filling them with value. The first thing I should have did was erase this grid, but I was so eager to get started, I skipped a step. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to jump around the drawing a little bit so you can see how I handled some of the more complicated areas. This drawing took me 3 hours to make. Like I said before, I'm choosing the values based on the reference pic and on the value chart. That's what's going to give this drawing 3-dimensional depth. I have 7 different values to choose from. Around the eye is where you see almost all 7 values being used. We're using the extra black pencil for value number 1. We switch to the 2B pencil and add value number 4. I lightly lay in some pencil lead and build it up to the value that I want. Now we're adding value 6. You may have noticed that I don't do much cross-hatcheting while I'm drawing. I make all the pencil marks go in one direction. I do that just because I enjoy it. It's just one of the choices I've made. And you're going to have to make these similar choices when you're making your drawing. Whatever you like. It's whatever you like. If you want to join me in making this drawing, you can find a downloadable reference pic on my Patreon page. The link is in the description. You'll also find there longer videos. Look up Eric Francis on Patreon. Again, there's lots of values around the eye. You have the darkest value right beside the lightest. Plus the white of the eye isn't entirely white. Take your time and study the eye. Now the lips can be challenging because they're very detailed. We're not focused on details, but on values. We're going to have to choose how we're going to represent these details with value. Before you begin to draw, study it with your value chart and kind of have a loose idea about how you're going to approach doing it. The teeth can also be challenging because of their shape and color. Most of us assume that teeth are white. Again, study them with your value chart and your reference pic. Are they darker or lighter than the lips? Are they all the same value? These are some of the questions you should be asking yourself. Perhaps you tried drawing before and you find it difficult. I need you to remember one thing. It can be done. There's a little voice inside you cheering you on, but it's not as loud as your frustrations. Focus on it. Be kinder to yourself and please try again. It won't be easy, but it's worth doing. And we are done. You might be able to pick out all 7 values in this drawing, and that's because I didn't use smooth gradation. What that means is the values don't transition into each other smoothly. And I did this because if I were to paint this, I'd want to see where each area of color would go. It helps me to visualize the painting. A drawing translates the reference pic into a language I can easily understand. In general, when a drawing has many values like this, it has great depth. If it didn't have a lot of values, it wouldn't have that much depth. The more values you add to a drawing or painting, the better. On August 25th, I will be releasing a workbook and 9 hours of video on acrylic portrait painting. I'm gonna make it available on Patreon for $5 for a limited time. Want to help support what we have going on here? Subscribe, like, leave a comment, or share. And if you want to help support monetarily, visit my Patreon page. I have longer videos and plenty of content. The link is in the description. All right. God is good. Peace.